Hello and welcome to the Doofcast, a film and TV podcast from Doof Media. I am your host, Scott Daly, and I'm joined, as always, by the man who's hiding over there in my closet watching this whole thing. It's Matt Freeman. How's it going today, Matt?
Doing good. Just don't open the closet. I'm solving a mystery.
This week on the show, we are beginning our brand new segment, Matt. This is our brand new ongoing project we're going to be doing over the next few months. If you missed the announcement last week, it's called Blind Spots, or if you're Matt, Floaters. Still don't really get that.
That's okay. You know, it's Lynchian, you could say.
Sure.
Difficult to penetrate the true meaning.
Sure. In this ongoing segment, Matt and I have each selected 5 films from the British Film Institute's Sight and Sound 2022 critics poll of the top 100 films of all time. Of course, these 5 films that we've each selected are films that we haven't seen, hence the term blind spots. Floaters. And so we're going to spend the next few months watching these movies. And then what are we going to do, Matt?
Well, we're going to chat about the film that we watched. We're going to decide whether it really belongs amongst the greatest films of all time and formally reject it if it doesn't.
Yeah, no, I like this. We are harsh critics. No prisoners.
Yeah.
No holding back.
You know us.
This week on the show, we are beginning it with Matt's first pick. He's going to be talking about David Lynch's 1986 film, Blue Velvet.
From the mind of David Lynch comes a modern-day masterpiece, so startling, so provocative, so mysterious, that it will open your eyes to a world you have never seen before.
She wore blue velvet, but in my heart there'll always be precious and warm a memory through the years, and I still can see blue velvet.
Hey, neighbor. Here I come.
Matt, what is Blue Velvet all about?
The discovery of a severed human ear found in a field leads a young man on an investigation related to a beautiful, mysterious nightclub singer and a group of psychopathic criminals who have kidnapped her child.
This movie was, as we said, written and directed by Mr. David Lynch. It stars Isabella Rossellini, Kyle MacLachlan, Dennis Hopper, and Laura Dern. Blue Velvet, by the way, is number 85 on the Sight and Sound poll, so the 85th greatest film of all time. Matt, obviously you had not seen this film before, so tell me, what did you think of David Lynch's Blue Velvet?
Well, I think like everything that I have seen of David Lynch, which admittedly is not much, it is one of those just creatively rich film experiences where I feel like it's going to stick with me for a while. On some levels, it is sort of baffling, but I say that not in a critical way, more a way of expressing that it doesn't really lend itself to analysis in the way that I feel like many stories do. Many stories seem to almost be inviting your analysis. Lynch almost seems to be like, I don't care whether you're able to understand what I was going for, or indeed, maybe David Lynch, don't understand what I was going for. Mm-hmm. And I was just expressing something from my subconscious. Anyway, all that being said, I really enjoyed watching it. It was strange. It was riveting. What did you think about it?
Yeah. First I want to say, if you had asked 1 week ago me, had I seen this movie before, I would have said, oh yeah, definitely. I was wrong. I had not seen this movie before. I don't know. It's interesting that happens sometimes, where you're just absolutely convinced you had seen a movie. You put it on, and the first 10 minutes you're like, nope, definitely not. that's what happened to me with this movie. I've seen many David Lynch films. I guess I just kind of lumped this in with the rest of the ones that I had seen, but not this one. So this was a blind spot for me as well, which is fun. I was absolutely captivated by this movie. It is, I mean, you know how I feel about noir, right? And this is definitely channeling a lot of classic noir, neo noir tropes, in a way that I find absolutely captivating and fascinating. And you're right. I mean, David Lynch is such an interesting filmmaker because, and we're not saying anything here that nobody knows, but he doesn't see the world the way most people do, and that expresses itself in the way he tells stories, which is not the way, I don't want to say a normal person, but not the way most people would choose to tell a story.
Yeah.
And it is fascinating. It also is many times almost impenetrable, confusing. But you're still there. Like he's so good behind the camera that even if you're sitting here scratching your head trying to be like, what are we doing here? Like, what are we saying with this? What are we trying to do here? What's going on? You're still just completely absorbed by everything.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel like Lynch is a filmmaker and sort of a storyteller and a creator kind of after my own heart in some ways. Like, this may not be an obvious comparison, but I see something like Shyamalan in the way that he thinks about just his whole approach to writing and directing, where it's like it's more about the vibe, the feelings that he's giving
Sure.
you, like shocking images that are resonating with something in him, and he's trying to get it to resonate in you. And it's not that it's not about the narrative, because I think this is a good narrative. It's a pretty solid, narrative driven film. But like that's not the thing that makes it on the list of the top 100 films of all time. It's
Right.
it's the shocking moments, the shocking imagery, the just kind of grabbing you and shaking you via the medium of film. And I like that. Like, even if it doesn't all sort of come together and present itself in a nice little bow for us, the critic, to be like, well, here's what he's saying with the metaphor and it's I like this more, actually.
Well, I think it's fun to talk about because I think one of the things I'm looking forward to this conversation is kind of trying to break down the copious amounts of symbols in this film with you, and really kind of try to get to the bottom of what we think the movie is doing and what the stuff means and all that stuff. I agree with you. I think the one thing that I will say that happens with me with Lynch specifically is these movies usually leave me feeling distant and cold a little bit. Like I think a perfect example of this is the scene, the Dennis Hopper, Isabella Rossellini sexual assault scene. Basically, that is a horrific scene, right? The things that are happening in that are just absolutely awful, but it's so weird. And Dennis Hopper's Frank character is so strange that, like, I almost didn't feel horrified. I just felt confused. And like
Yeah.
it just like there's not these movies don't connect to me on a certain emotional wavelength of, like, the specific empathy for characters. They connect to me on emotional wavelength of, like, fascination and confusion and like exciting confusion.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I find that really fascinating because, like, it's not that I need every movie to connect to me on a specific emotional wavelength, but it's just weird to me the way my brain connects to these movies as opposed to different directors rather.
Yeah. I mean, I think one thing in particular that this movie is doing is actually kind of playing into that, which is you're identified somewhat with Kyle MacLachlan's character, whose name I forget, so I'm just going to call him Muad'Dib for this entire conversation.
It's Jeffrey. How could you forget Jeffrey?
Yeah, that's true. He does introduce himself a whole bunch of times. Jeffrey.
It really bothered me that he never went by Jeff one time. He's Jeffrey every time.
Yeah. So you're identified with him, and he I don't know what the male form of the word ingenue is, but he's he's whatever that is. He's this innocent, but also he's got this kind of weird streak in him.
Yeah.
And I love that. Like, that was one of my favorite, like, that's the first kind of moment in the movie that really made me like become riveted, was realizing like, oh, okay, so this he's kind of weird. He seems really normal. He seems almost aggressively normal and like good looking, and he's got a nice car and he dresses well, but like he's got this weird streak in him where like the first time when he's like, all right, so what if I were to go into this woman's apartment and just hide there and just watch what happens? What if I were to do that? And you're like, are you insane? Where is this coming from? But pretty quickly you're just like, okay, I guess we're doing this. I guess this is the inciting incident of the movie, is that he's just a weird guy who thinks this would be a good idea for some reason. Or that's not even true. It's not that he thinks it would be a good idea. It's a compulsion for him that he just he sees something weird, and maybe it's frightening to him, maybe it's fascinating to him. You don't really quite know what he wants to get out of it. That's another thing. It's like, for us, the viewer, the mystery that I was interested in wasn't so much, what's going on with this woman living in this apartment and all these drug dealers. The mystery of the mystery film is what's going on with Jeffrey. What is his deal? What is he getting out of this? What direction is he going to go from here? What choices is he going to make? That was what had me absolutely glued to the screen, actually.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. He's absolutely fascinating, and I love Kyle MacLachlan as a actor. He's perfect here. I know Lynch really likes him, and I completely understand why. He's gosh, he is. There's so much of him that does come off like this is what I love about this movie is this Lynch opens this movie on this like picturesque Americana scene, with the fire truck driving down the road and the kids playing outside and this guy just watering his grass. It's like picturesque Americana. Then he has this is Jeffrey's father, has something happened to him, heart attack. I don't know. The movie never actually explains what the hell happened to his dad. And then Lynch does this thing where he moves the camera into the grass, this beautiful green Americana lawn, and it's just teeming with bugs, right? Like, and bugs is like a constant image throughout this film. There are bugs everywhere. I think the more clever, and I don't even know if this was intentional or not, Matt, you have to tell me, but the yellow person, that ends
the
up
man
being
in
the
the
cop.
yellow. Oh, yeah, okay, go ahead,
He's wearing a yellow jacket, like the wasp, like a yellow jacket.
Totally, he's a bug. They're all bugs.
Yeah.
I think they're all. I didn't think about this in those terms, but the other guys are all kind of wearing these like black leather coats, which are kind of shiny, like a beetle's carapace.
Mm-hmm.
I totally think that's intentional.
Yeah. Okay. So that's like obviously like he's journeying into the seedy underworld, right? Like I love, he finds the ear. The ear itself is also crawling with ants, and then Lynch does that shot where we kind of go into the ear canal, right? As this metaphor of entering this underworld, like the seedy underworld that exists here, and he is fascinatingly attracted by this thing. And this movie is really just a push and pull between these two women, right? He's got Dorothy on one side, who is this representative of this seedy, scary, violent version of Jeffrey. And then Sandy, the perfect angel like character, right? Like Laura Dern plays this woman so perfectly. And I think isn't Sandy, Sandra Dee, like the Grease character, like she's like the perfect angel girl, right? And he's kind of torn and caught between these two sides of himself, and that's really the push and pull of it through the movie for him.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's almost that's another one of these things. I guess I haven't seen this side of Lynch yet. I'm actually used to Lynch's work being like dark and disturbing and unpleasant and off-putting, etc. But the implementation of Laura Dern's character here, as you just described, is this like angelic figure of pure, light and goodness. And it almost to the extent where it's, Well, I'll just say it. It's over the top. Like it's using all the language of film to be like, she's an angel, like screaming it at you with like,
Yeah.
light and color and.
I mean, when they kiss at the end of the movie, like Lynch like turns on a spotlight from directly above them, as if to say the heavens are shining down upon them now because the beautiful angel has won her man. Like, yeah, no, it's not subtle at all.
Yeah, right. And I think stepping back, right? I mean, the whole movie is about the struggle for this man's soul between the forces of evil and the forces of good. And I think all this is expressed very clearly, although somewhat subtextually, that like he does have this kind of pervy interest in what's going on. In fact, that was one of my favorite moments, was when she says, like, are you a detective or a pervert? And he says, that's for me to know and you to find out, which is the creepiest possible answer to that question.
Yeah.
And he says it with this like creepy smile too. And she's like, okay.
Yeah.
But like, that's what the movie's about, is that's the question. Is he a pervert or is he a detective? And I think he has both of those parts to his soul. He's undeniably interested in this weird shit that's going on, for like unhealthy reasons, but also there's the part of him where he sees a wrong that he wants to right. And yeah, so Laura, like you said a second ago, Laura Dern is kind of the human symbol of all of that. She's she's the cop's daughter and everything too, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I think you're so right. The fascinating part about him, the most is like these moments where he wants to be this knight, this beacon of goodness that is going to come in and save Dorothy Valens. Like that's the thing he sees himself as, and then they kind of enter this relationship that is, due to the shit that she's going through, like violent, right? Like there's a lot of sexual violence in between Dorothy and Frank, and that's kind of being transposed onto the Dorothy Jeffrey relationship, and he's like into it a little bit. Like he says he's not at the beginning, right? Like he's not, I don't want to hit you, but like he's pulled into that, right? And that's Lynch symbolizing his kind of descent, and then the losing of his soul is that he's being pulled into this world and kind of becoming Frank Booth a little bit.
Yeah, I absolutely agree that he starts to get pulled more and more into it. You see some of the darkness kind of arising in him as the book goes, or not the book, the movie goes on. I mean, there's even a point, I forget the exact word he says, but the Frank Booth, played wonderfully by Dennis Hopper, by the way. He looks at him in the eyes and he's like, you're like me, or he's like, you're me, or something like that. And it's at a moment where, where he is in his arc, you could almost see him kind of turning dark and getting worse from there.
Yeah. It's really fascinating because I agree with you, Dennis Hopper, just incredible. I think one of the quotes I saw that I loved was like, a bunch of actors turned down this role because they just found it too disgusting and disturbing. And Dennis Hopper's like, I am Frank. This is perfect. It's just like, it's just classic Dennis Hopper. I miss him so much. But I'm really it's a part of this that's most fascinating to me is Dennis Hopper's particular kink, as it were, right? Like he's obsessed with the blue velvet, but he's also like the mommy daddy thing is really, really interesting, right? Like the way in which he engages in this relationship, which is both violent and dominated by him, but also he switches to this like very subservient, like, mommy want, like it's really, really interesting. And it makes me think like there is something, there's maybe something a little Oedipal here going on a little bit, with Hopper's relationship with Dorothy, and then kind of Jeffrey. Like you could say Dorothy and Frank are the mother and father, right? And Jeffrey is the son, kind of trying to supplant his father and take over, and possibly becoming his father in the relationship with his mother, or something like, I don't know. I get this feeling that's just something about that here, and I just wanted to talk about that with you.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, I didn't really have a good kind of overall thematic explanation for the mommy daddy stuff, uh, aside from just on the surface level, it kind of being like, yeah, okay, we're painting him as a sexually weird guy
Mhm.
who is also just the violent psychopath, and we're just making him disturbing and upsetting and unpleasant in every possible way, including this. But no, I like that a lot. The idea that there's a something more kind of elevated going on involving this being an Oedipal struggle.
Yeah.
I want to somehow tie that to the idea that his dad, you know, is the first character we see in the movie, and then he is immediately struck down by this um, mysterious disease, and then the Dennis Hopper character comes in, and it's not like there's anything necessarily that visually says like Dennis Hopper is like taking over as the father figure, but the fact that the film goes out of its way to kind of knock out his father,
Yeah.
um, thereby leaving a kind of vacancy, is an interesting uh, point that aligns with what you're saying here, I think.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And the idea that, like, I don't know, this Jeffrey kid is, he's a college student. I think the assumption is he's in his like freshman year or something in college, just recently graduated from high school. Um, there's honestly a lot of like uh the Graduate vibes that I got from this movie, to
Hmm.
be honest with you. Where you have this kid returning home, um kind of lost. He's like, we meet him. He's going to visit his father in the hospital, because his father's been laid low, and then he's just kind of wandering around, like not sure what he wants to do. Like, we don't really get to know anything about him, right? Like,
Yeah,
background wise, we know he worked with his dad at the store and then went off to college, and now he's back because his dad is ill. And he seems a little lost, and he's just immediately captivated by this idea, this thing to chase, this mystery to solve. um, and so there's parts of it, the stuff that reminded me of The Graduate is these parts where, like, you got a young kid, disaffected kid, searching for meaning and reason for things, getting involved getting involved with an older woman, while he also has a younger woman. Like, there's parallels here. I'm not
yeah.
crazy, right?
No, totally. I didn't really think about it because it's so tonally different.
Yeah, it's tonally completely different. Yeah.
But yeah, you're totally right. I mean, I think we're saying something very different about the character too. But yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. I don't have anything smart to say about it because it's been forever since I watched The Graduate. But yeah, I mean, if any, I mean, I guess you could say this is maybe some kind of commentary that Lynch is making on The Graduate, on or a spin on it, or I don't know. I'd have to think more about that. Maybe we can think more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think just this idea. Well, like, one of the things that I'm so fascinated about in this movie this is kind of a I don't know if I want to call it coming of age, but like a it's a story of a character kind of traveling to the underworld, right?
Hmm.
And living to tell the tale. He's able to escape and return to the world of goodness. And I mean, it's not even necessarily that the underworld is defeated or vanquished or anything. It's still there, but I mean, this is a very optimistic ending, right? Like, everyone has kind of a good ending in this.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
things are okay. Like, he didn't wreck the relationship with Sandy. He's still with Sandy. We get to see that Dorothy is reunited with her child. And every like, his dad makes a full recovery. It's a very kind of rosy, happy ending. So, like, it is like this thing where this character, and this is kind of the Graduate comparison I'm making here, where this character is like searching for meaning, or searching for something, travels to this, or makes choices that send him down this dark road, and manages to pull himself back in time, um, and returns to happiness.
yeah,
The robins come back, or whatever the bird was. So
yeah.
that is
Yeah.
not the theme of The Graduate at all. So it does, I mean, it does to me show Lynch is kind of like optimistic in a lot of ways.
That's fascinating because, like, tonally, it's this gross noir film,
Yeah.
but narratively, it's a fairy tale. Whereas
Yeah.
The Graduate tonally is borderline a comedy, but narratively is fairly cynical.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's really that's funny.
I never thought of it that way, but yeah, the idea like noir as a genre is so dark and pessimistic and the world is black and terrible, and this is a movie that is acknowledging the existence of that world, but is saying that people can and do succeed in excising themselves from that world.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's most, I think you're right. It's like, I don't want to just say like, oh yeah, definitely it's as simple as that. I mean, so there's this one moment that I keep coming back to, which is almost like a totally forgettable. It's almost like a joke. In fact, it may just be a joke and I may be reading too much into it. um but you said a second ago that we know so little about Jeffrey. And there's like the moment where he gets up after he's been beaten and he comes to the dinner table, or the breakfast table, I should say, and he's all bruised up. And there's these two old women sitting there, and you're like, who the hell are these people? Because, like you said, the movie doesn't introduce these characters to us, and I think we're just supposed to assume that it's like his mom and his aunt. And his aunt wants him to explain what happened to his face, and he's like very like firmly and sternly being like, I don't want to talk about it. Don't ask me about it. And his aunt keeps talking, and he's like, and he says, and I quote, "Aunt Barbara, I love you, but if you don't, but no, sorry, Aunt Barbara, I love you, but you're gonna get it."
Yeah. Oh God, that was so weird. Yeah.
Which is such a strange thing for this character to say, because it's like, wait a second, and then it like cuts very abruptly after he says that too. It's like there's no beat for us to be sort of permitted to see their reaction, which would tell us like, is this just how you kind of joke around with your loved ones and friends, that you cut that out, or I'm gonna, like, where it's obviously a joke? Or is this a household that's so rife with domestic violence that he says that and it's taken at face value? Like that's why it stuck with me, is the fact that he says it at all, and then like the sharp cut after it. I was like, is this a tiny little crack into a much darker world of his life?
I mean, I'm so glad you talk about this. I love that. I don't know. I mean, I agree with you. Like the cut there, like Lynch's choice to cut there it's so abrupt. It's like right after he's almost still saying the sentence when we cut away from it.
Yeah.
And it is such a weird choice. And to me, it was, this is about halfway through the movie, and this guy is like fully headed down this dark path, and he's kind of developed this violent tendency towards women, right?
Yeah.
Like he's kind of been trained on so like he meets resistance, and it's moderate resistance. Like it's literally just he comes to the dinner table with his mom and his aunt, and he's beaten, the shit has been beaten out of him, and they just ask him about it. They just say, hey, what's going on?
Yeah.
And he says, I don't want to talk about it. And the thing his aunt says that makes him say this, I have the quote right here. Sometimes it's good to talk things over, Jeffrey. For instance, they say that many marriages are saved by people. And then he interrupts and says, Aunt Barbara, I love you, but you're going to get it.
Yeah.
And I do think this is a reflection of he's been being trained that any relationship with a woman, whether it's sexual or just conflict or anything, is violence. This is how I'm going to react to anything. So she's pushing just back against him slightly, and bam, threats of violence.
No, I think that's a good point. I actually, I believe I was thinking something similar at the time, because that we are seeing his kind of descent, and there are very few things that indicate that he is descending, because he is consistently, against Dennis Hopper's character. It's not like he's going to become his protege or something.
Yeah.
Although there is something really interesting to Dennis Hopper putting on lipstick and kissing him a bunch of times.
Yeah, I mean, I think that once again is the confusion of that's not necessarily Oedipal, but like the sexual confusion of this whole thing, I think is really fascinating in that.
Yeah.
Because of that scene, because of his relationship with Ben, I think was the name of the guy that sang the other song that made him cry. Like he has these relationships with two different people that they sing for him, and he weeps, and then something's going on there, right?
Yeah. And I mean, I kind of like that it's never, explained. I think it
Me
would kind of
too.
ruin it all if it was explained.
This is one of my favorite things about Lynch is that we don't have definitive answers for a lot of these things. He doesn't want to give them to us, either in the movie or external to the movie. He wants us to just piece together the imagery and come up with our own meaning for it.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I like that silly little throwaway line at the breakfast table. I found very disturbing. Even relative to a lot of the. I think this is what it is. It comes out of nowhere, is what it is, right? Like when you're in the middle of these like weird scenes in that room where they have the kid hidden, and there's all these weird characters, and Brad Dourif is being super weird, and everybody's being weird. You're actually vibing with that. You're like, yeah, this is weird. I like it.
Yeah.
But then that line that he says, it's a slap in the face. It's like, whoa, that's where we are with this guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I'm just weirdly hung up on this one line, but I found it. I think this is the thing about Lynch is he constructs the movie, he constructs all of his movies with this awareness of what's going to affect you and how it's going to affect you, and he does really, really unusual things that nobody else would do.
Yeah. I mean, that has me thinking, and just speaking of lines, like there's so many lines in here that I'm just like, I really scratched my head at the first time I heard, and I just want to kind of pick apart. The one is, how Frank threatens people, right? Frank is this fascinating character. The thing he says when he's basically telling Jeffrey to back off and don't see Dorothy anymore is he says, I'll send you a love letter straight from my heart. You know what a love letter is? It's a bullet from a fucking gun, fucker. You receive a love letter from me, you're fucked forever. You understand? So like the fact that Frank phrases the way he commits violence through the lens of love, it seeming like this is what it's all about, right? It's about the idea of love and sex and the ways in which different people in this world express those ideas and those emotions, and the dark, terrible, awful side of that that is Frank, versus characters like Sandy, which is the pure innocent form of that same thing. And it's really fascinating, and that gets into this recurring beat also between Jeffrey and Dorothy, where they have sex, and she continually brings up like, I still have you inside of me, right? Like it gives me strength. That she says that the first time, and then when he finds her just naked and beaten up in the middle of the road, the thing she says is like, I still have your poison inside of me, and it's giving me strength, which again, I don't even know what to make of that, but fascinating stuff, right?
Yeah, a lot of mixing up of sex and violence for sure. I kept noticing, we almost just like ignore profanity in movies at this point, because it's like, yeah, they're just showing that they're bad guys, but it's like, no, Dennis Hopper's character Frank, he calls people you fuck. He uses it as it's not that it's that unusual to use that word that way, but the consistency and repetition, where it's like, it's not just a coincidence that every time he addresses someone, listen to me, you fuck. He's calling them, the sexual act basically is almost like identifying them with it. Like, this is how he sees the world, is in terms of that's all other people are to him. Is like an opportunity or a potential sexual congress, which is also for him the same thing as an act of violence. and those literally are the same thing for him.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. I love that. I think you're totally right there. That's great.
Yeah, that's the level of thought that goes into a Lynch movie. I need to really catch up on. I mean, there's a reason why I think there are 2 Lynch movies on this list. Is that like I know that he does a thing that I really like, and I'm just not caught up on.
Yeah,
Lynch.
this is the fascinating thing about this to me too, because I like we talked about this before. The way that I emotionally connect to these movies is so different that like I just don't like ever like. There's never been a time in my life where I've been like, "Fuck yeah, I can't wait to watch this David Lynch movie." Like every time I've sat down with a David Lynch movie, I've enjoyed it. I like my experience with it, but like it's never a thing I'm excited to do. Like Lynch doesn't release too many new movies these days, but like I would never put him on my must see the weekend it comes out list.
Yeah,
because I just don't connect emotionally to the movies in that way. It's kind of a thing where like sometimes it feels like work, and not in a bad way. Like I enjoy my time with it, but like it's like you sit down at the end of a long day and it's like, what do I want to watch tonight?
Yeah.
And I will so rarely reach for Lynch.
Yeah, no, me too. I mean, there's certain there's like musicians and painters and so forth where like I'm kind of aware that their work is genius, but I never really want to listen to it or look at it because I'm like I don't. It's like you said, it actually leaves you cold emotionally. But then maybe you come back later, or maybe you can't get it out of your head. And you're like, well, what did that mean, though? and it's very rewarding in that way. It's a more cerebral. And see, that's the thing, though. This I want to be very clear because, like, I'm not saying, oh, Lynch doesn't affect me emotionally. He only affects me cerebrally. He definitely affects me emotionally. It's just not in any of the ways that I want to feel ever. It makes you feel weird, and it's like he's like poking at parts of you.
Yeah,
that's what I like about the Jeffrey character is he's sort of poking at the part in all of us that is kind of a prurient little creep that would enjoy watching a movie like this, right? Like he knows he's like, I know that you sick pervert in the audience are enjoying watching this shit. I know that you are. And I'm going to put in the scene a little creepy kid to remind you of how creepy you're being. And it's going to make you feel really uncomfortable. And I'm going to push this button over and over in the course of this movie.
No, I think you're spot on with that. I guess the way I think I would try to explain my feelings on how I am emotionally connecting these movies is like, if the movie had ended with Jeffrey, like instead of the closet door opens and Jeffrey shoots Frank in the head, if the movie had ended with the closet door opens and Frank shoots Jeffrey in the head, I don't think the feeling I would have felt there is like sadness on behalf of Jeffrey. Like I don't think I would have felt that emotion.
Yeah.
Like I don't think I would have cared whether he lived or died or not, like emotionally. So I mean that's kind of what I mean. Like certainly this movie made me feel things. Like I'm not saying it didn't, but it's just a different kind of feeling. Like it's I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah.
It's just weird. It's a weird movie.
Yeah.
He does things weirdly.
Right. I mean maybe I'm rounding it off too simply, but for me it's just it makes me feel unpleasant emotions. And there's a reason I still haven't seen Antichrist by Lars von Trier, even though Lars von Trier is on my list of directors where I'm like, I know he's a genius. I know that everything I've seen of his, I have been like, that was just perfect. But I never I never feel motivated to pick up Antichrist because I just know that it's going to be torture, basically.
Yep. Love that movie. Absolutely never again. Holy shit. Yeah.
I mean, I would have put it on this list.
Thank you for bringing all those images back into my head right now.
Yeah, if it were on the top 100 list, we'd be watching it.
Well, thank God it's not there. I
Yeah.
wonder. The list goes to 250. I need to look and see if there's any Lars von Trier on any of this list at all. I'm sure
Yeah.
he's got to be at least one place.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe you can look.
Yeah. Another thing I wanted to point out that kind of drove me insane a little bit here, but I think is the perfect actual choice to help define who Jeffrey is, and that's his earring. It seems so weird and out of place the first time you see this character, and it is part of like the uncomfortable feeling you feel around Jeffrey, and the like to me like the push and pull of what type of person he is, that he just has this random earring that like no one ever talks about or mentions. It's just there the whole time, and you're just like, what? Why do you have that earring? Why'd you do that?
Yeah,
Explain yourself. You don't seem like the type of person that would be rocking an earring.
And also it's just kind of a slightly odd earring, right? Like it's in slightly an unusual place. It's also not an attention grabbing earring. It's like the smallest silver earring band that you can get.
Mm-hmm.
But it's, yeah, I mean, there's that. Like that kind of reminds me of the other great moment where he's walking with Laura Dern, and suddenly he's like, "You ever seen the chicken walk?" She's like, "Huh?" And then he does this incredibly awkward, weird, dancey walk, and she's like, "Yeah, that's great. I'm really attracted to you now that you've done the chicken walk." It's so awkward and like,
he's such a weirdo.
Yeah, these are all just elements that to me add up to just make us feel really weird about this guy, where like, yeah, he chose this really conventionally attractive man, but I mean, I'll say like that there's something about, I blanked on his name even though I just said it a second ago, that actor,
Kyle MacLachlan.
That's he like, his performances are always kind of off.
Yeah.
Like there's always a distance and a weirdness. Like that's the sense in which he actually makes a good Muad'Dib, is that he's like, you never quite understand what's going on under the surface, and it actually works to his advantage in that movie, and it kind of works to his advantage in this movie too. Like you don't want an actor who's necessarily an open book for a role like this.
Sure. No, I agree. He's perfectly cast here. That's actually, the dialogue is something I wanted to talk to you about, actually. And I think your Shyamalan comparison really works here as well, because people in David Lynch movies don't talk like human beings. Like they don't. And like, I think a layperson could confuse that for bad acting. You know, sometimes like characters give line reads that are like very monotone and almost like by design flat. And there's a lot of line reads in this movie that are like that, I think, where characters are just kind of either overdoing it or underdoing it in a way that I find really, really interesting. The thing that I felt, and maybe you disagree with me, but the thing that I felt is Laura Dern isn't performing like that at all. Like Laura Dern's performance in this movie to me was very naturalistic, very the way she gives her lines is very different from a lot of the other people, how the other people talk. And like to the point where it made me think that was a deliberate directorial choice, right? That she is a symbol of this goodness, this pureness, this difference, the escape from the dark underbelly of the world. And so she comes off as much more naturalistic, whereas everyone else comes off as kind of rigid and odd and weird in both the actions they're doing, but even the way they say their lines.
No, I totally agree. I think pretty much every other character in the film comes off as, you know, Lynchian in that ineffable way, where they're cold and weird and stiff and unrelatable. Except her, she's the one normal person. I don't know if I would call this an exception to that or not, but I will say, you know, Frank, the villain, while he doesn't seem like a normal person by any means, he definitely is far more emotive than I'm typically used to seeing. I mean, he's almost Baron Harkonnen level, like hamming it up, right?
Yeah.
I guess that probably is a fair connection, actually, because Lynch wants his villains to be operatic, and then everybody else around them is almost sort of paralyzed. But no, I
Yeah,
agree
no.
with your point.
No, I like that. I think that's really interesting because the thing you kind of want to do, and the thing I even did at the beginning of the episode was that the most obvious comparison points here are Dorothy on one side and Sandy on the other, right?
Mhm.
And that's a logical comparison. It makes sense. But I do think there is something to the idea that actually no, it's Frank on one side and Sandy on the other.
Mhm.
And them being the only two characters that are giving these more naturalistic performances, I think is really interesting in how it does that. I mean, they're opposite sides of the spectrum performance wide, obviously, but they are different and apart from the way everyone else moves, the way they talk, like very, very different.
Yeah.
I think this really stood out to me specifically when I'm sitting there like watching McLaughlin and Laura Dern like do a scene together, right? And she's just like talking like a what a high school senior would talk like. That's the performance she's giving. It's
Yeah.
just she sounds like a real person, and then she'll give a real person line to McLaughlin, and he'll come back with a ridiculous Lynchian performed line, and you're just like, what the fuck, this is weird. I love that. Like I love it so much, actually.
Yeah, me too. I it's hard to nail down exactly, but I agree that that's happening, and I agree that there's intent behind this. I wish I had a better way of expressing like why I think he's doing it, why he does that, because it pushes you into this frame of mind where it just feels like he's trying to do something different with movies than any other filmmaker is trying to do with movies. Like it's almost like he's some kind of Jungian shaman who's trying to reach into your subconscious and confront you with like sort of pre-verbal imagery and things that are going to lodge into your brain in this way that you don't even know how to process, and you're going to walk out of the movie being like, I don't even know what I think about this. I have no pre-made slot to fit this movie into. And I really admire that.
I mean, I think that's because like thematically there's no moment in the story where you can sit back and be like, okay, so what did we all learn? Well, we learned that people are bad.
Yeah.
But also there's good ones too.
Yeah. The robin ate the bug at the end. So.
Yeah. The light will come back, right? That's what we've learned, that there is darkness everywhere, but the light will return. But that's, I mean, there is no like pat, easily digestible lesson to walk away from this movie with. Like, now I will approach my life differently because I've learned this very important thing from this movie. It's like, no, it's just like, that was a series of very uncomfortable images that had a happy ending, and I have to figure out how to process all that stuff.
Yeah, and I think it had a happy ending, but also I think the overall emotional feeling that it leaves you with is not really happy because you've been confronted with all this horror. The metaphor at the beginning where we follow the camera down through the grass into the terrifying bugs, and then the whole movie is just that in macrocosm, where it's like you have this beautiful slice of Americana that Jeffrey lives in. Which very, very well shot, well directed, kind of classic, beautiful, almost throwback to an age earlier than the 80s, which is when it was shot. And then underneath all of that is this absolutely rancid world of crime and murder and drugs and just this monster who is essentially given carte blanche to terrorize people in the underbelly of this town, the infestation of the bugs. And so when you walk away from the movie, it's like, yeah, okay, they killed Frank, but like you've left me with this feeling that like hidden inside of everything around me is this rot.
Yeah, and none of these characters solved it. They just uh, removed themselves from it.
Yeah.
They just stepped back above it. They didn't, like the shot at the end where we zoom out of McLaughlin's ear, right? We went into the ear and then we zoom out of the ear. So we've just left that world behind. We've escaped from hell.
Uh-huh.
But hell is still there. And it's gonna remain there. We're just gonna hang out here, and everything will be nice now. Yeah,
Oh, I
no, I
love
think
that.
there is something. I think there is something to that, for sure.
I love the idea that you go into the ear, meaning you kind of go into the mind, and then you
Mhm.
exit back out of the mind. It's almost like we've just been inside someone's inner struggle the whole time.
Yeah, yeah,
That's really cool.
yep. And now we're out, and everything's fine now.
Uh-huh. Yeah, we can
Sure,
pretend
everything's
everything's
rosy
fine now.
again.
Yeah.
Just we just don't. The bird ate the bug, so we don't have to worry about the bugs anymore.
Uh-huh. Yep, exactly. Man,
What a great movie.
there's so many specific little moments that I would love to bring up, but then the whole we would talk for like 45 minutes, or I'd just be like, hey,
Yeah.
remember the part when when he walks into her apartment and there's like the dead guy and then the other guy who's standing there with part of his brain sticking out? Remember that?
Yeah.
Anyway, that's
What a shot. Like that's so cool in how fucking weird it is.
Yeah.
Because it's like, why are you standing up still?
Uh-huh.
What are you doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
Fall over.
Right. It's like it's true horror.
Yeah.
Because you like a guy with his brains blown out, you understand. A guy with his brain kind of poking out of his head, but still standing there and staring. You're like, what the hell? And that's just great. Just great stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, totally. I love the name of the town. We didn't talk about that. God, what's it called again? It's like
I don't remember.
It's like Loggingville or something. It's like, God damn it! I just had it and then I closed the window. It's like a logging town, basically. We're told, or
Okay.
it was a logging town at some point. Lumberton
Okay.
is the thing that the radio announcer says. Get those chainsaws out. At the sound of the falling tree,
Yeah.
it's 9:30. So
Yeah.
that's such a fascinating little thing too, because like
Uh-huh.
it's we get this picturesque image of Americana, but it's this town built on the idea of destroying nature to build things.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. And I mean, the fact that the inciting incident is he finds this ear
Mhm.
in a field is like this horror that's just lying there amidst nature. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff.
Thank you for reminding me about the field and the finding of the ear, because that is another thing. I think Lynch does such a good job at visually showing us character traits he's going to reinforce later with plot elements. Because the one thing that I really found fascinating about that, so we have Jeffrey kind of walk through the field on the way to the hospital, and on the way he like stops and picks up a rock and like throws it. I think he's trying to hit the barrel, the metal barrel standing up in the middle of that field, I guess. And he throws the rock, he misses, and he walks along. He leaves, goes sees his dad, walks back, sees the barrel again, and picks up another rock, throws the rock at the barrel, misses again, and then can't stop. Like just starts like going out of his way, looking, searching for new rocks. Like it's and that's his character trait, right? He can't stop. He can't like once he gets something in his head, once he gets an idea or a curiosity or a desire, like he just has to keep going and going and going, and it keeps getting him into trouble. Like that's a perfect like subtle reinforcement of a character trait, because it's like, why are you so obsessed with hitting this barrel with a rock? What does this matter? And it's, well, he's just got to pick at it. It's a scab. You just got to keep picking.
Yeah. That's beautiful. I didn't think about that at all. I love that so much. Genius.
Yeah, God, what a great movie. So I think that's where we want to end these conversations if we have them. Is, as we said at the beginning, this was the 85th greatest film of all time. You have now watched it, Matt. Do you feel like that is a fair and accurate summation of this movie? Do you think this movie should be in the top 100? Are you okay with its place in the top 100? Should it be higher up? What do you think?
So I'll tell you I'll tell you where my head is right now. Like at this exact moment, I'm like, I don't know if it's the 85th best movie of all time. But, however, if we kept having this conversation for like 3 more hours, I feel like I can draw a little y equals mx plus b curve through my opinion, because just over the course of this conversation, I've gone from thinking like, yeah, that was a really kind of weird, disturbing experience. I think I think I liked it, to where I am now, which is like, okay, I see like 10 more things about this movie that's genius that I hadn't thought about before.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if I just kind of kept picking at it, kept throwing rocks at that barrel, I would arrive at a place where I was like, this movie is genius, every frame perfect. And so, by induction, if you will, I think it probably deserves to be on this list. I also don't really know that there's any validity to the concept of like the top 100 best movies ever, because it's like, what does that even mean?
Matt, you're destroying the whole concept of the segment.
Well, I think to my mind, the point is to say, look, these are obviously like movies that we're going to get a lot out of,
Mm-hmm.
whether or not we agree that they're literally the best movies ever made. And that's helping us. Okay. Yes, it deserves to be the 85th best movie of all time. What do you think? Do you agree?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, so the thing is, like, this is a critic poll, right? So like they polled critics from around the world about their favorite movies. And guess what critics are going to have in common when it comes to their favorite movies? Critics are all film fans, but they're film fans that watch a shit ton of movies. So in general, a critic's favorite movie is probably going to be a movie that does things differently than most other movies, right?
Yeah.
Like because the novelty and the enjoyment of going to sit down in front of a screen and seeing something that you had never seen before is just going to be. I think if you look through this list, the most films you see on here are films that are kind of playing with the concept of storytelling, the structure of film, these ideas, these concepts. They're playing with them and pushing boundaries and testing new things, and those are going to be the things that critics most often respond to. So like in that idea, just the fact that it's a critics poll kind of distorts it in a different way than, like, for example, I think they did a similar list for just asking directors from around the world. They asked all the directors, give us your top 10 favorite films of all time, and then we'll take all that together and make a big list. That list I think is very different from the critics list, because directors obviously are thinking about different things when they're falling in love with movies. All that being said, I think this movie was very, very fascinating. I've seen, a lot of David Lynch movies. Mulholland Drive, I think, will always be my favorite. And it is, I know it's not a movie that you've seen, but it will be a movie we're visiting here in the future. And it's I think, in the top 10 of the critics' greatest films of all time. So I think people seem to agree with me that that's a better movie than this one. But I do think this felt to me like, I was a little worried how I was going to react to this movie, because sometimes, as mentioned, Lynch can leave me very cold sometimes. But I just really enjoyed watching this film. I just really, really did. And can I think of more than 85 films that I like better than this movie? Maybe, maybe. But like you said, that's an exercise I don't really want to do. I think what I've learned here is it to me, it makes in complete sense why critics would really love this movie enough to where it would land in the top 100.
Yeah. I agree with all that. That's excellent point about the critics list being different. I mean, I think that may be one reason why it was a good idea for us to do this, though, is that we also watch a lot of movies. So
Yeah.
we're probably going to like the stuff that the critics like. Although, it might be fun at some later point to look at that director list and see if there are any on there that fit the criteria of being stuff that we haven't seen that we want to see. We could use that excuse.
I think that sounds like a great idea. But yeah, I mean, I think we too are looking for things to surprise us, right? we're looking for things that we haven't seen before, and especially when you get into a series of, like, there have been times watching movies where I think in the middle of our Ridley Scott stuff, on top of watching other bad movies not related to Ridley Scott, there was times when I was like, oh man, I just really need to see a good movie, like really bad. And
Yeah.
so I don't think that's ever going to happen with any of these films. Even if we're like, I wouldn't put this in my top 100. I think there's going to be something to talk about and something to glean from these films.
Yeah, I agree.
By the way, Lynch is on the top 250 list like a bunch of time, and I feel like they cheated because they put Twin Peaks: The Return, which is a television show. It's on this list. I don't know if you're allowed to do that.
Yeah, that's bullshit.
All right, that was great, folks at home. If you watched Blue Velvet for the first time, along with us, let us know what you thought. If you are a longtime Lynch watcher and just have some other thoughts about Blue Velvet that we didn't talk about, some of your personal interpretations of the many confusing things that happened during this movie, please let us know. We want to hear them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Doof.
All right, Matt, we have to talk about Barbenheimer. We have to. There's no other choice here, Matt. The most ridiculous thing in the world happened this past weekend.
Tell me.
So Barbie and Oppenheimer opened at the box office and had just the biggest weekend ever. Okay, not exactly true. I think this was only the 4th biggest weekend ever.
Oh.
But but even that
Yeah.
is absolutely insane.
Yeah. Yeah. So to be clear, it's like the total box office receipts were the 4th biggest ever. Not
Correct.
that either of these two specific films was individually the best ever, but the point is everybody went to the theaters this weekend.
Yeah, and they saw both of these movies. I mean, so the final gross at the end of the weekend was Barbie with $162 million and Oppenheimer with $82 million. That is the first time ever that two movies have opened in the same weekend and both made more than $80 million. That's never happened before.
Okay.
Huge rousing success. I think we should say here that we have both seen Barbie. Neither of us have seen Oppenheimer yet, so we can't really talk about Oppenheimer in any kind of detail, but Barbie was good. You want to give like a quick 30-second no spoilers review of what you thought of Barbie?
Yeah, I mean, I took my kids. We laughed the entire time, all 4 of us. It was delightful. It was fun. It was funny. There's a lot there to deconstruct if you want, but you could also just enjoy watching it and have a great time. I not that I have anything against deconstructing things either. It's just it's just a very fun watch, and I am glad that I saw it. How about you?
Yeah, I liked it a whole lot. I mean, I love Greta Gerwig as a writer and a director, and I enjoyed this film. I think like the second act of the movie didn't work as well for me as the first and the third act. There was definitely a point in the middle of the movie there where I started going, uh-oh, because the movie was starting to kind of fall apart for me. Very specific to a lot of the Mattel stuff, which I just think didn't work for me at all. The very meta Mattel stuff going on in the middle of the movie. But then the movie writes itself as it enters the third act, and everything about the third act is just glorious and wonderful. I agree with you. It's a really fun movie. It is kind of remarkable to me how much of a Greta Gerwig movie this is. Like, I don't know how many of the other Gerwig written or directed films you've seen, but like, this is her. This is the things, like, you know, there's a moment where the actress America Ferrera makes a big speech in the movie, and like, not only is that written like exactly like I know Greta Gerwig talks, but like even the way she gives the speech has the cadence of how Greta Gerwig talks. It is so essentially a Gerwig film, and I think that's really cool. I think that's really cool that she snuck this really fascinating examination of what it means to be a woman, and also, frankly, what it means to be a man in the world we live in, into this corporate product. I do think it is a little weird to me. Like, it just never will be not weird to me to know that this is basically just $140 million toy commercial. Like that's just what this movie is. And like, it's cool that something existed inside of that's resonating with a lot of people, and also is saying something really interesting and worthy of discussion about men and women in the society we live in, and the roles that the things we played with as kids have in that depiction, and also the way we interact with each other and all these things. But it is just a really expensive toy commercial.
Well, I think it's amazing that it's able to be that, and it's also able to be a very fun movie that my children can enjoy, and
Yeah.
it's also able to be something that can spark as many interesting conversations as I've had about this movie in the last
Yeah.
week. It's really hard to do all those things at the same time, right?
I agree. And there was a movie that came out earlier this year called Air. It was a Ben Affleck directed movie. Basically, it was about how Nike discovered Michael Jordan, which isn't actually how it happened, but it is in essence a 2-hour Nike commercial. Like, it's a good movie. It's incredibly well directed by and written. Affleck is really good. Matt Damon's in it. He's very good in it. It's a good movie, but I couldn't shake the feeling that, oh, this is just a freaking Nike commercial. Like, that's what this movie is. It's so weird. And that, like, on top of everything that I loved about this movie, which there's tons I love about this movie, I also couldn't help shake the feeling that, like, Mattel is now launching a cinematic universe because this was just a big commercial. And what a weird world we live in.
Yeah.
And like this idea that if we just meta reference the fact that we know that this is just a corporate cash in, like it's fine now. I don't know. Like, it's so strange to me. The whole thing is so strange. I loved the movie. I love Gerwig. I'm so happy for her, and I'm so excited for her future prospects with directing, and can't wait to see what she does with everything else. But man, it's weird. It's so weird.
Yeah, I agree. It's very weird. I'm repeating myself, I guess, but when your little kids laugh and just laugh and laugh and laugh, it's like, yeah, good. I'm happy.
No, I completely
and
understand why people are loving this, for sure.
Yeah, and I'm laughing too. So like, that's the key thing. It's really hard to make jokes where me and the kids are all cracking up.
Mhm.
Like, usually it's one or the other, basically. But anyway, yeah, very funny movie.
Yeah, I mean, Margot Robbie is incredible. Ryan Gosling, just amazing, just so amazing. There's people talking about how Gosling kind of stole the show a little bit here. It's not that I inherently disagree with that. I just think he's like given some of the best lines in the movie, so he has such good jokes to deliver that he's the thing you remember the most leaving the movie. But I think Margot Robbie is incredible.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. I mean, yeah, he's like maybe literally my favorite actor. So yeah, I think he did fantastic, but I don't think there were any weak points in this movie at all.
My God.
Yeah.
So incredible job. I think the thing I really wanted to talk to you about here, though, is this accomplishment, because, we talked and have talked throughout the year and before about, the struggle of studios to figure out how to get people to come to the theater. And like, you have to look at this as an absolute win for the marketing department of Warner Brothers, right? Like I think Warner Brothers marketing team had a very good Monday. They had a very, like, everyone went to work on Monday in just the best mood ever. And it's really fascinating to me because they really aggressively marketed this thing. Like Warner Brothers, they went all out with this thing, the campaigns and the tie-ins, but I don't want to take away credit from them, but like, part of this is the same thing we talked about with that movie that came out in January, Megan, where part of it at some point becomes this viral meme that has nothing to do with marketing teams and what decisions they're making on what ads to run where and when and stuff like that.
I do agree that the concept of Barbenheimer got out of their hands.
Yeah.
But that's why it's, I mean, again, it's impossible. It's like a paradox to say, like, did they create the meme or does anyone create memes? right? Because I mean, the first time I heard the word Barbenheimer was literally a friend saying to me, I'm gonna do Barbenheimer this weekend, and me literally being an idiot, going like, what? And then being like, go see a double feature, Barbie and then Oppenheimer, and me being like, oh, good joke, man. And then being like it's already, it's a thing, Matt. Where have you been? Anyway, the point is, I heard it via word of mouth. I didn't see it on Twitter first, right? So I just think it's interesting that yes, it was apparently just so conceptually alluring that people promulgated it on their own. I think there might even be something specific to this about the fact that it was Barbie and Oppenheimer. Like, I think it's more than just a joke, that it's like, haha, it's funny because it's like a guy in a black suit who looks like death in front of a mushroom cloud versus Barbie in her pink. It's like, it's a funny contrast, but I think it's like, well, that also is what allows it to be this kind of celebration of cinema, and this thing where you can envision going to the theater and watching both of these movies, because it's kind of like you go to a restaurant, and if the waiter's like, okay, would you like to have tacos and then enchiladas afterward? And you'll be like, no, I do not want to have tacos and then enchiladas. I will be full from the tacos already. I don't need. Well, what about enchiladas and then tacos? You're like, no, same reasoning really. But if they're like, what about enchiladas and then ice cream? You're like, or sopapillas, enchiladas and then sopapillas. Also, you don't want to have ice cream and then sopapillas, right? Get where I'm going with the metaphor? You want to have two very different things that feel different and leave you with a very different mouthfeel walking out of the movie.
Yeah, but I'm with you until the end there, but I think the fascinating thing about this to me is, like, this isn't the first time counter programming has existed at the movie theater, right? Like, they do this all the time. The fascinating thing about this in particular is that instead of the thing that we always do, in which two things are released at the same time and thus are naturally put in competition of each other, the movement and the meme just kind of embrace this idea of, well, let's see both of them and let's let both of them succeed. And it's really fascinating to me how that happened. And that felt like that happened organically. I do think part of it is that, as you said, they are so different,
right?
That it's apples and oranges, but like instead of everyone kind of collectively decided, instead of saying apples or oranges, they said apples and oranges. Let's do them both. Let's do it. And it's really fascinating how that happened. And I'm sure there are plenty of people in meetings across the country right now going, how do we generate something like this again? How do we make this again? And I don't know if they have the ability to do, like, I don't think you can artificially in a controlled manner generate something like this. I think it just happens and you just have to roll with it.
Yeah.
I mean, and again, I don't want to take anything away from the marketing team of either movie, because I think they did do a fantastic job. Although frankly, I think Barbie did a fantastic job with their marketing, and I think Oppenheimer just marketed in a very traditional kind of way and just benefited greatly by the Barbenheimer thing. They just got like pulled up along with Barbie. And I think they're probably thrilled with that too. But yeah, I mean, some of this is just this kind of ineffable moment, and for me, I mean, it's really exciting that the culture, like, for a brief moment, for like the next 2 weeks or maybe even less, like the monoculture of the world is centered on films again. Like, which is something that has not been true for a very long time.
Yeah. Years now.
As a lover of film, it's really exciting for me to see everyone, and I mean everyone, talking about movies. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love it.
And talking about basically the same couple of movies, right?
Yeah.
No, I agree. It's great. I'm just going to touch on my hobby horse, which is like, and it's really just what you just said, which is like the marketing teams did a great job. It helps that they're both good movies, apparently.
Yeah,
I haven't seen Oppenheimer. And it helps that they both looked like good movies. And this is my thing. The tweet length thing is, make the movies look good and people will go see them. This seems to be a wisdom that has been lost from the Hollywood marketing because they don't bother anymore. I mean, there are so many trailers that you and I will talk about where it's like, that looks like crap. Nothing appealing about that. Why would anyone go see that? And then it does badly, and it's like, oh, it tanked. Why did it tank? It's like, well, nobody wanted to see it because you didn't make it look good. Maybe it was good, maybe it wasn't good. It looked bad.
Yeah, we saw one of those trailers right before Barbie. Blue Beetle.
Blue Beetle looks like garbage.
That
It's
movie's
the
gonna
worst
make
trailer.
$7.
Yeah, it's the worst trailer I've seen in years. And it's a perfect example of what I'm talking about.
Yeah. No, I think you're totally right. And I think the other lesson here, it's interesting because like one of the narratives I was hearing this weekend was this idea of like, see, people want original movies. And I had to step back and be like, original? Barbie?
And a biopic?
Yeah. And I don't think that's actually the truth. Obviously, people like IP. That's how we work. We like IP. The difference is, we're easily to bore, and we're tired of the old IPs. Like the one thing this year has proven, without a doubt, is that we have no patience for old IP anymore. Indiana Jones, no. Mission Impossible, no. Transformers, we Little Mermaid did okay, right? But like not nearly as good as they expected. The two biggest movies of the year so far, Barbie and Super Mario Brothers. Huge, massively well-known IP, but importantly, well-known IP that had yet to be exploited.
Right. Yep.
And so the lesson here, I think, is not pump out 37 Barbie movies. The lesson is, I don't know, explore some new original IP, hire some interesting people to work on it, and see what happens. And you're not always going to get a thing like Barbie. This is not always going to happen. The Mattel Polly Pocket movie that is being directed by Lena Dunham is probably not going to make $162 million in its first weekend. But occasionally you hit on things like this, and they do incredibly well.
Yeah. I'm processing what you said because I hadn't really thought about the specific fact that we're bored of the IP we've seen a bunch of, but that doesn't mean that we're bored of IP. I like that. Yeah. I think you're right.
Yeah. The other thing I think we'll say as we wrap this up is that the victim of this Barbenheimer success is Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1, which came in fourth in its second weekend, a 65% drop from its first weekend to its second. Lost to Sound of Freedom, the QAnon child trafficking film by Angel Studios, which the numbers of that movie most likely bogus. Like I don't know if have you heard anything about Sound of Freedom? It's actually pretty fascinating what they're doing.
I mean, I've heard a little bit about it. I've actually heard that it's like not a bad movie. It's just this weird culture thing surrounding it.
It's not actually, I mean, the joke is it's a QAnon movie. It's not actually like literally a QAnon movie. It's just that some of the people in the movie and also a lot of the biggest supporters of the movie happen to be QAnon people.
Right.
Those people in interviews are peddling QAnon conspiracy bullshit.
Okay.
It is really just a movie about child trafficking. That's just which is a real thing that happens. But so apparently what this movie's doing, rather insidiously or geniusly, depending on your point of view, at the end of the movie, it says, I think Jim Caviezel, the credits roll, and then Jim Caviezel like steps on stage at your movie theater and says like, this is a really important message. We need to get it out there. Go to this website and you can buy a ticket for someone else to go to the movie. And so basically what's happening is church organizations and individual people that are going to see this movie are buying hundreds, thousands of tickets. And then what they do is they like go on social media and they say the 7:30 showing of Sound of Freedom we've bought people have bought 150 seats, so you can just go for free. And that's why like the majority of these theaters are actually just empty.
Mhm.
Because the tickets have been bought, but they don't necessarily have a person to sit in the seat. Like people can choose to if they want to, but not. Really interesting tactic there that seems to be working for them because the movie's made $125 million so far.
Yeah, I didn't. I heard something about that. I didn't realize it was quite as bad as all that. That is a tactic that only works every once in a while, and only if you've pandered to very specific audiences, I guess. But
Yeah, see my reaction to learning this was, if you think that the concept of child trafficking is such an important message, and why would your call to action not be donate your money to the organizations
right,
attempting to end child
yeah,
trafficking, and not this fictional movie we
right.
made?
That's a good point. Good point, my friend.
I mean, it's like there's plenty of movies out there that like are about global warming and something that end with like, here's a website where you can go donate towards global warming research, blah blah blah, right? Like, but just imagine if you made a climate change movie that was like,
Yeah,
please donate to this movie
right. Yeah,
because climate change is important.
yeah. This is a very important message. So more people should drive to the theaters to watch it. Yeah, I don't know. I think Jim Caviezel should just go find that stash of treasure on that island and use that money to fund the movie.
He makes me so sad because I loved him as an actor, and he's just really the guy has gone off the deep end. You listen to him talk, and he's just buying into every one of these conspiracy theory things. It's just
Yeah, it is sad when that
it's
happens to
sad.
people. Yeah.
Yep. All right. Well, that is the good and bad of Barbenheimer. I don't know what Mission Impossible does now, Matt. I like they're at 378 worldwide. I don't think they're gonna get as high as the last one for sure. I don't know what this means.
Yeah, I forget. Maybe it was you who said this, but the part one of it all is actually kind of a disincentive, or
Yeah.
at least it seems that way. Because who wants to see half of a movie, right?
Yeah. I mean, like we said, people go to the theater maybe once a quarter.
Yeah,
And so if you're sitting down wanting to decide, oh, we're going to go to the movie theaters for the first time this month, what are we going to see? Part one? Nah, I don't want to do that. I don't think people like that. So I agree. I think that was a bad call. We'll see. I think there is definitely an opportunity for this movie to, not do well in the box office, but do well on streaming, where people just have deprioritized it, and then when it hits streaming, they'll pick it up, and then that might build momentum, and the second half of it will do very well. But man, not good at all.
yep.
I wonder, looking back on it, if releasing the weekend before Barbie and Oppenheimer was a mistake, like that they should have seen coming. Like, obviously no one could have predicted those films were going to do as well as they did, but like, should they have predicted something that might be a bad call? I don't know.
I feel like the answer is yes, although I would want to look at a calendar and see like how many options did they really have. Like,
Yeah.
I do feel like it was predictable that either Barbie or Oppenheimer would have siphoned off some of their money. I mean, Oppenheimer, I feel like Oppenheimer is on the same wavelength as the kind of person who wants to go see like a, serious film. Not that Mission Impossible is an adventure, but it's like you tell yourself that you're watching something,
Yeah.
thoughtful. I don't know, man. They shouldn't have done it. Tom should have stopped them.
Yeah. We need to be put in charge. We'll tell them.
I agree. Yeah.
All right. That is going to do it for us this week. If you have any opinions on Blue Velvet, or on Barbie, Oppenheimer, or the Barbenheimer phenomenon, please reach out to us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com, over on our Twitter account at doofmedia, or on the subreddit r/doofmedia, where you can find a post for this episode, right now.
That's right. If you're not subscribed to the Doofcast, please go ahead and subscribe. You can find us on all of the major podcasting platforms.
And if you like what we do here and want to support us, consider becoming a patron of Doof Media. You can head over to patreon.com/doofmedia and you get tons of bonus episodes, extras, voting in book clubs. There's so many things you unlock when you head over there. So go to patreon.com/doofmedia, check it out. And if you want to join the community and pledge at any of those levels, please do so.
That's right. It would also be awesome if you could give us a rating and a review over on Apple Podcast. Each review helps us get more exposure and introduces new people to the shows that we're doing here.
All right, folks, that is it for this week. Next week, we're continuing our Blind Spot series. We are going with my first pick. We're going to be watching Jane Campion's The Piano. I've never seen this movie, obviously, so I don't think you've seen this one either, Matt.
I think I've seen parts of it when I was way too young, and I'm actually profoundly traumatized. So I'm sort of dreading this experience. So thanks for picking this one.
You're welcome. You're welcome. That'll be next week. We'll see you then.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.